Fire! Near the flagpole!" shouted a voice. The silence of Arlington shattered. Boots struck marble, rifles caught light, and the air, that sacred stillness of the tomb, filled with smoke. A spark had leapt from a maintenance panel beside the plaza, licking through the trimmed hedges, and now a curl of orange flame crept toward the flag that flew beside the unknown's resting place. If you believe duty ends with ceremony, you've never met a tomb guard. Subscribe now and witness what happened when one soldier chose flame over fear. Brooks's command voice was instant. "Hold line!" The crowd froze. The relief guard halted mid-step, the metal of his rifle snapping to vertical. Hayes moved like a shadow, hand raised, scanning for civilians. But Rios, he didn't move to hold. He moved to act. His gloves clenched, his eyes locked on the flag twisting in the wind above the growing fire. The heat shimmered on marble. His pulse thundered louder than the tourists' cries. "Rios!" Brooks barked, but the name vanished into smoke. The young sentinel broke formation, 3 strides, 4, crossing the sacred line that no one, not even a guard, was meant to breach without cause. The rope quivered behind him. Sight, smoke cutting through sunlight. Sound, flags snapping like whips. Smell, burning grass and polished brass. Texture, sweat under wool, and the weight of duty heavier than flame. Rios ran straight into it, through the haze toward the flag. The pole leaned slightly, heat wavering around it. A paper program, blown by wind, burst into fire beside his boot. He stamped it down, eyes never leaving the stars and stripes above him. Behind him, Brooks's jaw locked. To interfere now meant chaos. To let it continue meant insubordination. And yet, what soldier could stand idle while the nation's symbol burned beside the unknown? Hayes whispered, "He's going to get himself court-martialed." Keene, camera raised halfway, murmured, "Or remembered forever." The crowd murmured prayers. An old widow clutched her hands to her chest, Mrs. Thompson, whispering her husband's name as if the flames might hear it. Rios reached the base. The fire licked his sleeve, scorching wool. He tore the flag from the halyard, spinning it free just as flame touched fabric. He smothered it against his own chest, rolling once on the ground, ash rising around him like smoke from a battlefield. Brooks and Hayes ran forward, the spell of ceremony shattered, the smell of ozone mixed with the bitter smoke of cloth. "Medic!" someone cried, but Rios was already pushing up to one knee. His face blackened, gloves half-burned, the flag still clutched close, scorched at its edge but intact. He rose slowly, back straight, boots planted in ash. The wind caught behind him, clearing the smoke just enough to reveal his figure. One guard standing alone, holding the wounded flag high. The crowd fell silent. No sound, but the flag, flapping once, defiant. Brooks stood at the rope line, eyes glinting through the smoke. "Return to line, specialist." Rios hesitated, chest heaving. He looked at the flag, scarred but alive, then at the tomb, untouched behind its marble guardians. He nodded once and stepped forward, slow, deliberate, as if still on his 21. Each step echoed across the plaza. Clack, clack, clack. Hayes met him halfway, eyes hard but shining. "You just wrote yourself into the wrong side of protocol, soldier." Rios' voice was hoarse. "Then protocol needs to understand what that flag means." The last of the smoke curled away. Keene lowered his camera. Somewhere in the distance, the cemetery bells began to toll. Slow, mournful, perfect timing. Rios came to rest beside Brooks. His uniform smoked faintly. His right glove split along the palm, skin raw beneath it. Brooks didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, "You ever do that again without order, I'll have your badge." "But?" He glanced at the flag. "You did what a guard was born to do." They stood there, soldier, commander, and the battered flag between them, as the sun poured through the thinning smoke, washing the white marble gold. For a heartbeat, the plaza looked like a battlefield reborn in peace. And then, a sharp crack. The halyard above snapped, sending the second flag, the one still flying, tumbling toward the embers. Every head turned, every breath stopped. Rios took a step forward, eyes blazing, as Brooks shouted, "Stand fast!" The smoke was gone, but the silence it left behind was worse. A cordon of MPs and emergency crews had surrounded the plaza. The marble gleamed wet where hoses had washed away ash. The crowd was gone now, Only footprints and melted wax from tourists' candles remained. Rios sat on the steps, sleeve rolled up, medics dressing the blistered skin along his forearm. His burned glove lay beside him, stiff as cardboard. Brooks stood a few paces away, expression unreadable. SFC Hayes approached, her uniform immaculate despite the chaos. "He's stable," she said softly. "No nerve damage, just lucky." Brooks didn't look away from Rios. "Luck's not regulation." Keene, the public affairs officer, stood at the perimeter with his camera lowered. His voice carried the weight of guilt. "That footage will go everywhere, Sergeant. The Army should be proud." Brooks turned to him, calm but cold. "We're not here to trend, Captain. We're here to guard the dead." Rios lifted his head. "Permission to speak, Sergeant?" Brooks gave a slight nod. "I couldn't stand there and watch it burn, sir. Not that flag, not here." The medics exchanged a glance, civilians trying to understand soldiers' codes they'd never live by. Hayes knelt, eyes sharp but human. "You know the rule, Rios. No movement without relief, no deviation from line ever." Rios's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, it wasn't deviation. It was defense." Brooks finally spoke, voice even. "Defense of what?" Rios met his eyes. "Of the symbol we stand for." For a moment, even the wind seemed to pause. The distant sound of a bugle carried across the cemetery. Faint, mournful, taps echoing through the marble rows. Keene broke the silence. "Command will want a statement and an investigation." Brooks turned, gaze still on the horizon. "Of course they will." Hayes exhaled, barely audible. "They'll call it breach of post." Sight, scorched flag folded tight in Rios's hands. Sound, the hiss of extinguished embers. Smell, smoke soaked into stone. Texture, coarse wool sticking to sweat and soot. Rios looked at the flag again, its lower edge blackened, one stripe half burned. "She's hurt," he murmured. "She," Hayes repeated quietly. "You talk like it's alive." Rios looked up. "Ma'am, it is." Brooks turned away sharply, pacing to the edge of the plaza. He needed to think, to remember where the lines between regulation and reverence were supposed to be drawn. But every step echoed like accusation. Keene followed. "Sergeant, with respect, what that young man did, the world's going to see as pure devotion. You discipline him, they'll call it cruelty." Brooks stopped. "And if we don't, Captain, they'll call it chaos." Keene hesitated. "Then what are you going to do?" Brooks looked toward the tomb. White, perfect, eternal. "My job," he turned back to Rios. "Report to the relief commander's office in 1 hour. Uniform cleaned, boots inspected, statement prepared." Rios stood, still holding the damaged flag. "And this, Sergeant?" Brooks looked at it, at the charred fabric that still managed to catch the light. "Turn it into the armory for documentation." Hayes hesitated. "I'll log it personally." As the medics cleared away, Rios followed Hayes toward the administrative wing beyond the plaza. The marble underfoot was slick, reflecting fragments of flame still flickering in his memory. Keene lingered beside Brooks. "You're not angry he saved it. You're angry you'd have done the same thing." Brooks didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the tomb. "Some rules," he said finally, "exist so we never forget the cost of breaking them." Inside the relief commander's office, the fluorescent light buzzed faintly. The air smelled of starch and antiseptic. Hayes laid the folded flag on the table, her hands lingering on the fabric. Rios stood at attention, his uniform freshly brushed but still shadowed by soot around the collar. "Sit," Hayes ordered quietly. He obeyed. "You know what happens next?" "Yes, ma'am, formal review." "And if they rule against you?" Rios's voice was calm. "Then I'll accept it." Hayes studied him, not as a soldier, but as someone she might have once been. "Why'd you do it, Rios? Really?" He met her gaze. "Because I've lost enough to fire, ma'am." She tilted her head. "My brother," he said softly. "Afghanistan, fuel truck explosion. We couldn't even recover him. The only thing they gave me back was the flag." The room went silent. Hayes's eyes softened for the first time. "And you swore no fire would take another one." He nodded. Outside, footsteps echoed, Brooks entering. "Commander," Hayes said formally. "Report ready." Brooks looked at Rios, then at the folded flag. "The archivist is on his way to collect it. Says it's not standard issue. Not standard? Hayes frowned. Sir, this was posted at the plaza this morning. Brooks shook his head. No, it wasn't on the supply manifest. Keene entered quietly behind them, camera bag slung over his shoulder. That's because it wasn't supposed to be. All eyes turned. He unzipped the bag, pulling out a document sleeve. Inside, a photograph, the same flag, pristine, draped over a casket. This flag, Keene said softly, was from a burial at Section 60, one of the unknowns from Vietnam. It was meant to be transferred to the museum after today's ceremony. Rios froze. You mean, Hayes whispered, he saved a burial flag. The realization hit like thunder. The air seemed to hum. Even the buzzing light felt suddenly sacred. Brooks's voice dropped to a near whisper. You're saying that flag belonged to one of them? Keene nodded. Yes, Sergeant. The unknowns. No one spoke. Only the faint rustle of the flag's edge against the tablecloth. Rios stared at it, the fabric still dark from soot. Then it wasn't just a flag, he said. It was a life remembered. Hayes swallowed hard. Command will need to know. Brooks nodded slowly. They'll know. But this stays off record until I decide how. Keene exhaled. Sergeant, the footage... Brooks cut him off. If you leak a second of it before clearance, I'll have your camera buried next to that flag. The tension hung, electric. Hayes lifted the flag gently, setting it into a protective case. It'll go to the vault for the night, under guard. Rios stood. Permission to stand watch, ma'am? Brooks looked at him. The young soldier's eyes were tired, singed with smoke, but burning still with the same light. Granted, Brooks said quietly. And specialist... Rios straightened. Sir? Brooks's gaze steadied. Next time the fire comes, make sure it's worth burning for. Outside, thunder rolled far off, a storm brewing beyond the Potomac. Inside the marble walls, Rios took first watch beside the flag's case. The air was still, heavy with meaning, and as the lights dimmed, the scorched fabric shifted faintly in its glass, just enough to make it seem as if it breathed. Rain slid down the barracks windows like sweat on marble. Every drop echoed against the silence. The old guard quarters were spotless. As always, rifles stacked perfectly, boots aligned heel to heel. Yet something felt broken tonight. Not in the building, in the air. Rios sat alone at his bunk, staring at the burn marks on his gloves. Across from him, the scorched flag rested inside its glass case, lit by a single desk lamp. Its shadow stretched long across the floor, like a sleeping sentinel. Thunder rolled outside, faint and deliberate, as if heaven itself was walking its 21 steps. Hayes entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Can't sleep either? Rios looked up, managing half a smile. You could say that, ma'am. She set 1 mug beside him and took a seat on the trunk across from his bed. The aroma of black coffee mixed with the faint smell of gun oil. Command meets in the morning, she said. They'll want statements from all 3 of us, Brooks too. I know. Are you ready for that? Rios looked at the flag. I don't think you can rehearse for defending your heart, ma'am. Hayes studied him, eyes sharp, but the edges softer now. You're a good soldier, Rios. That doesn't mean the system will see it. He nodded. I didn't do it to be seen. The thunder cracked again, closer this time. Footsteps echoed from the hall. Brooks entered. Coverless, uniform sleeves rolled to the forearms. Rain had soaked the edges of his boots and his jaw was locked tight, the kind of tension that comes when a man's duty and conscience collide head-on. Commander on deck, Hayes murmured out of habit, rising to her feet. At ease, Brooks said quietly. He looked around, the dim light, the folded uniforms, the flag in glass. His voice dropped. That flag you saved, Specialist. It's been authenticated. Rios straightened. Sir? It's confirmed, Brooks continued. Section 60, Vietnam unknown, transferred from the archives last night for ceremonial display. Hayes's jaw set. Command's going to have questions. They already do, Brooks replied. They want explanations, accountability, maybe punishment. Keene stepped through the doorway then, hair damp from the rain. No camera this time, just a file in his hands. His voice was steady but remorseful. I gave them my footage, all of it. Rios looked at him sharply. You, not to the press, Keene cut in, to command. They deserve to know what really happened before anyone else twists it. Brooks crossed his arms. You're learning respect, Captain. Keene nodded once, and regret. I brought that flag here. I wanted to film its rededication, to tell the story of how the unknowns are remembered. I never thought, he looked at Rios, that someone would have to risk his life to protect it again. A gust of wind slammed the barracks door open, rain spraying in before Hayes pulled it shut. The storm outside had grown wild. Inside, the silence felt tighter. Brooks finally spoke. You broke line, Rios. That's a fact. Protocol says I report it. Yes, sir. But, Brooks said slowly, protocol also says we honor the flag above ourselves. He walked toward the glass case, the reflection of the flag shimmering over his chest. The board tomorrow will decide which principle weighs more. Rios swallowed hard. With respect, Sergeant, it already has. Hayes frowned slightly. What do you mean? He looked at the flag, voice barely above a whisper. When I carried her out, the fire touched everything. My sleeve, my gloves, but not a single thread of that blue field burned. Keene's eyes widened. That's impossible. Rios met his gaze. Maybe, or maybe it isn't. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the rain hitting the windows like a slow salute. Hayes broke the silence. Rios, you're due before the board at 800. Get some rest. But Rios shook his head. Permission to stand watch again tonight, ma'am? Brooks studied him, then nodded once. Granted. Hayes gathered her papers and left quietly. Keene followed, but before stepping out, he paused at the doorway. If they try to bury this story, Sergeant, I'll make sure it lives. Some truths belong to everyone. Brooks didn't answer. When the door closed, the commander sat on the edge of the bunk across from Rios. The stormlight flickered over both their faces. You remind me of my first relief, Brooks said. Young, hungry. Thought discipline was made to test heart, not cage it. Rios glanced at him. Did you ever break line, sir? Brooks looked down, thumb tracing a scratch on his wedding band. Once, Kandahar 2009. Explosion took a convoy. I ran through fire for a friend I couldn't save. Lost my command for it. Rios's breath caught. They demoted you? Brooks shook his head. No, they gave me a new post, here, guarding the ones who can't be saved. The thunder rolled again, soft this time, like applause from the heavens. Brooks stood, his shadow stretching across the flag's case. Tomorrow they'll ask if what you did was right. You tell them it wasn't. Rios frowned. Sir? You tell them it wasn't right by regulation, but that it was righteous by heart. Let them decide which they still believe in. Rios nodded slowly, emotion tightening his voice. Yes, sir. Brooks turned toward the door, then stopped. Specialist, he said quietly. Sir? If you're going down for breaking line, I'm standing with you. The words hit like a rifle crack in the dark. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper. The light flickered once, then steadied, shining softly on the flag within its glass. Brooks paused at the door. When dawn comes, we walk in together, whatever happens. Rios looked at the flag, its edges barely visible under the lamp's glow. Understood, Sergeant. Brooks gave a small nod and left. Rios turned off the light, leaving only the reflection of lightning dancing across the case. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something impossible, the faint shimmer of stars in that blue field glowing on their own, like the spirits of the unknowns stirring in the storm. And somewhere deep inside the marble silence, a single echo, a voice, maybe imagined, whispered through the dark. Guard well, soldier. The living are watching. Rios stood at attention until the thunder faded, shoulders straight, eyes never leaving the flag. The rain stopped before dawn, but the world still smelled of thunder. By 800 hours, the command hall gleamed, polished floors, folded flags, the quiet hum of air conditioning filling the sterile silence. The tomb guards rarely entered this building in uniform. Here, the perfect lines of their bearing met the crooked lines of politics. Brooks walked beside Rios down the marble corridor, their reflections trailing behind them. Rios's uniform was pressed, every button gleaming, but the burn on his wrist still showed, a quiet testimony to what the report would call unauthorized action under hazardous conditions. Hayes followed, carrying the sealed case that held the scorched flag. Keene trailed last, allowed only as witness, not officer. "Eyes forward," Brooks said softly. "No apologies in your step." "Yes, Sergeant." At the end of the corridor, a heavy oak door waited. The placard read, "Board of Review, 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment." Inside, 4 officers sat behind a long table. Silver eagles glinted on their collars, files stacked neatly before them, pens aligned. They didn't look angry. That would have been easier. They looked disappointed. Brooks called, "Specialist Daniel Rios reporting as ordered." The presiding colonel nodded. "At ease. Sit, Sergeant Brooks. Specialist, remain standing." Rios obeyed, hands locked behind his back, eyes forward. "Specialist," the colonel began, "you are here in review of your conduct during the ceremonial guard rotation of November 8th. Our records confirm you broke post without relief, entered the restricted zone, and engaged a hazardous element without authorization. Do you acknowledge these facts?" "Yes, sir." "Do you wish to make a statement?" Rios drew a slow breath. "Sir, I acted on instinct. A fire was spreading toward the flag by the tomb. You chose to act without command," the colonel interrupted. "Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question hung like smoke. Rios's voice steadied. "Because the flag represents every soldier who ever stood where I do. I couldn't let it burn while I still had breath." The colonel's expression didn't change. He jotted a note. "Your duty was to the tomb." "My duty," Rios replied quietly, "was to what that tomb stands for." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the other officers, a major, leaned back, studying him. Brooks sat motionless, eyes forward. The colonel continued. "You understand that the Sentinel's code is absolute?" "Yes, sir." "And yet you broke it?" "Yes, sir." "Then why should we not remove your badge?" Rios hesitated. His heart pounded loud enough to hear. He looked briefly at Brooks, then back at the board. "Because, sir," he said softly, "sometimes a soldier must step off the marble to protect what the marble means." The room went silent again, the kind of silence that hurts. Keene's camera clicked quietly once, recording the stillness. Hayes stepped forward then, setting the glass case on the table. "With permission, sir," she said. "Evidence exhibit. The flag specialist Rios retrieved." The colonel gave a curt nod. Hayes lifted the lid carefully. The fabric lay folded, edges darkened but whole. One officer, a lieutenant colonel, frowned. "It appears undamaged, aside from minor discoloration." "That's the problem, sir," Hayes said softly. "It shouldn't look this good." The board exchanged confused glances. She reached into her folder and slid forward a photograph, a still from Keene's footage. It showed Rios in the smoke, the flag wrapped around him, fire curling inches away. The colonel leaned closer. "That's direct exposure." "Yes, sir. Wool, nylon blend. It should have melted, but it didn't." Keene cleared his throat, stepping closer. "If I may, Colonel, the video also shows something else." He set a tablet on the table, playing the clip. The sound of flames filled the room. The image, Rios kneeling, fire reflecting in his visor. Then, a brief flash, like light bursting from the flag itself, before the smoke swallowed everything. The officers stared. "What is that?" one whispered. "Lens flare," another asked. Keene shook his head. "No, sir, that flash came from inside the smoke." Brooks spoke quietly for the first time. "Whatever it was, it left that flag untouched." The colonel's face hardened. "You're soldiers, not priests. We deal in fact, not miracle." Rios met his gaze. "With respect, sir, I saw it too, and I know what I felt in that moment." The colonel eyed him carefully. "And what did you feel, Specialist?" Rios swallowed. "That I wasn't alone." Silence again. Even the hum of the lights seemed to dim. Hayes stepped back, hands clasped. "Permission to submit final evidence, sir." "Proceed." She pulled another document from her folder, a certificate, yellowed with age, stamped Department of the Army, 1975. It listed the flag's origin. "Recovered during disinterment of the Vietnam unknown, preserved for ceremonial remembrance." At the bottom, an inscription, handwritten in fading ink. "For those who never returned, guard well their rest." Keene whispered, That writing wasn't visible until the smoke cleared. The heat revealed it. The colonel stared at the inscription. For the first time, his expression faltered. Brooks rose slowly to his feet. "Sir, Specialist Rios didn't break his oath. He fulfilled it. That fire wasn't an enemy. It was a test, one he passed with the flag intact." "I stand with him." The colonel's jaw tightened. "You realize what you're saying, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir. I'm saying sometimes the unknowns remind us they're still watching." For a long moment, no one moved. The flag lay silent, glimmering faintly under the fluorescent light. Finally, the colonel closed the folder. "This review will recess. Recommendation pending. Dismissed." Rios saluted, then turned to leave. Brooks followed, Hayes and Keene behind them. Outside, the morning sun had broken through the clouds, turning every marble stone into a mirror. Hayes whispered, "That inscription, no one's ever seen it before." Keene nodded. "Maybe it wasn't meant to be seen, until today." Rios looked back through the glass doors toward the hall. Inside, the flag's reflection seemed to shimmer, faint, alive. Brooks put a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever they decide, you did right by them." Rios exhaled slowly, eyes still on the horizon. "Feels like they decided already." A gust of wind swept across the grounds, carrying the sound of distant rifles firing a salute, 3 volleys. Then silence. And somewhere in that silence, faint but unmistakable, came the echo of boots on marble. Step, step, step. The next dawn came quiet, golden, impossibly calm. Arlington lay washed clean from the storm, grass glistening, marble cold and perfect again. The flagpole stood straight in silver, the plaza restored to order. But every man and woman who'd stood through the night knew something had changed. They gathered in silence at the edge of the tomb. Brooks, Hayes, Rios, and Keene. No press, no tourists, just soldiers and the sacred wind. The review board had gone late into the night, no verdict delivered, no reprimand yet issued. But Brooks didn't need paper to know what mattered. Some truths didn't fit in reports. He looked to Rios. "You sure you want this post?" Rios nodded. "It's what I was born for, sir." Hayes adjusted his belt line one last time. "Then walk it like they're watching." Rios met her gaze. "They always are." Brooks turned toward the tomb. "Resume the guard." The command echoed across the empty plaza. Rios stepped forward. His heel struck marble, sharp, clean, eternal. The world went silent. He turned, rifle snapping to shoulder, the air crisp enough to bite. The old rhythm returned. 21 steps, each one measured by heart, not by pace. Sight, morning sun slicing through mist. Sound, boots clicking against white stone. Smell, dew and salt from polished metal. Texture, the cool weight of honor in every motion. Keene lowered his camera and simply watched. For once, no lens could do it justice. Halfway through the IRA rotation, Rios stopped, his eyes lifted to the flagpole above the tomb. The scorched flag, the one saved from the flames, now hung there, sealed to the new halyard, its edges still darkened, its folds imperfect. And yet, it moved. A faint tremor at first, then a full ripple as wind swept down from the Potomac. Hayes blinked. There's no breeze, but the flag lifted anyway, rising, unfurling. The blackened edges seemed to pale in the sunlight, the burn marks dissolving, the fabric smoothing. Rios froze mid-step, the plaza bathed in light. Brooks whispered, "What in God's name?" The flag shone now, red, white, and blue blazing bright, colors restored as if freshly sown. And in that impossible moment, the air felt alive, humming, almost singing. Rios brought his rifle down to present arms, motion fluid and reverent. Every instinct screamed this was ceremony, but his heart whispered it was something holier. Keene's eyes filled. "It's the same flag," he murmured. "I know it is." Hayes stood rooted, hand to her chest. "Then that means—" Rios spoke quietly, not to anyone, but to the marble before him. Message received. Brooks exhaled, every line of duty and pride written across his face. Then, somewhere from the far rows of headstones, came the faint echo of a bugle. One clear note, then another, taps, no player visible, just the sound, drifting through the mist like memory itself. Keene swallowed hard. "There's no funeral scheduled this morning." Brooks didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sound carried across the plaza, the notes soft, trembling, alive. Rios resumed his walk, each step falling perfectly in rhythm with the song. 21 steps, 21 seconds of eternity. The camera in Keene's hands shook slightly, his voice barely audible. "I wanted a story for the living, but this is for the dead." The sun rose higher, washing the marble in gold. The flag above gleamed pure once more, the scars erased. Hayes whispered, "Miracles don't happen here." Brooks answered softly, "They just stand guard." The final note of taps hung in the air, fading slowly. Rios halted, turned, rifle down, eyes steady ahead. No words, no motion, just stillness, the sacred kind only the old guard knows. And for a heartbeat, every whisper of wind, every shift of light, every breath of the morning seemed to bow with him. Hours later, long after ceremony ended, the board's verdict arrived. No disciplinary action. Act deemed within the spirit of the Sentinel's oath. Rios was cleared. Brooks and Hayes signed the report. Keene sealed it in his camera log, never to be released publicly. The world would never know what truly happened that morning, but every tomb guard who walked that plaza from then on knew something new, something unseen but felt, that the unknowns still watched. That duty, carried far enough, crosses into faith. As Rios prepared for his next rotation, Brooks stopped him at the ready line. "Specialist," he said quietly, "about yesterday." Rios nodded. "Yes, Sergeant?" Brooks extended his hand. "You didn't just guard the tomb. You reminded us why it exists." Rios clasped it firmly. "Then we'll keep reminding them, sir." He turned, stepped out into the plaza again, the rifle gleaming, the marble whispering beneath his boots. The flag above him fluttered once, red against blue sky, alive and whole. And though the cameras never caught it, those who stood near swore they saw faint figures in the mist, soldiers in forgotten uniforms watching in silence, the living guarding the dead guarding the meaning of the living. Step, step, step. The sound carried through the morning air, across the endless white rows, down through every grave marked unknown. A single man walking 21 steps, and an entire nation walking with him. Because some miracles aren't seen, they're guarded. If this story moved you, if the courage, duty, and silent reverence of these soldiers remind you what honor truly means, subscribe for more stories that keep their legacy alive. Their silence is eternal, but their watch never ends.